Steve Saylor, can you tell me what is human biodiversity?
Human biodiversity is a term that emerged in the 1990s as a way to help understand all the differences we notice in people all around us. Its obvious complement is human cultural diversity. It's like nature and nurture, a couple terms that were invented by Sir Francis Galton back in the 1800s. So if you look at the world, you'll notice all sorts of interesting patterns among people out there. For example, when I came up with this term in 1996, the Olympics were going on in Atlanta. And at that point, in the race, the 100-meter dash, the race to be the world's fastest man, for the 4th Olympics in a row, all 8 of the finalists were black, men of West African descent. Now that's 32 out of 32, and that's a pretty amazing number. And the study of human biodiversity suggests that, well, what could cause that? Is there something cultural that one set of people in the world never try running? Nah, running's something that just about every kid in the world tries to do. It's not polo, it's not yachting. So the best explanation, the simplest one we can come up with, is that there's some sort of hereditary advantages in sprinting. Now, the good thing about human biodiversity is it helps make predictions about the future, which is the purpose of science, and they're pretty stable predictions. So for example, the next 3 Olympics since 1996, we've seen exactly the same thing. Now we're up to the last 56 finalists who've made it to the 100-meter dash finals in front of hundreds of millions of people have all been black men, 56 in a row going back to 1984. So that's a pretty interesting thing to discover about the human race. It has some widespread implications.
What would you say to someone that says race doesn't actually exist and that in fact it's a social construct?
Well, it seems to exist in the 100-meter dash in the Olympics that we all see on television every 4 years.
Why are you so obsessed with this human biodiversity?
I think everybody's pretty obsessed with human diversity. It's just a fascinating topic. Why are some people different from other people? Something people begin to notice is the smallest of children. When I got started in the 1990s, I noticed that there were plenty of experts on human cultural diversity who were doing a fine job. The other half of the equation, the human biodiversity, there was an opening there. There was an empty niche for somebody who would think about it systematically, rigorously, and reasonably. A lot of people were just kind of scared of the whole topic. And I felt like I could add a little bit to human understanding by taking on that one area that others were avoiding.
Is human biodiversity a political movement or is it a field of study?
At the moment, it has to be a political movement as well as a field of study because it has to fight for its right to exist. My goal for human biodiversity is that someday it will have helped liberate the American mind enough where it doesn't have to be a political movement anymore. It can just be a subject of great natural interest to humanity.
What would you say to someone that said, why can't you pay more attention to how everybody's the same?
Well, I do. Well, let's try it. Let's make up a list of how everybody's the same. Well, we all have one head, we breathe air, this list is getting kind of boring fast. See, knowledge consists of similarities and differences, contrasts. Like you can take information and turn it into a digital stream, a binary stream of ones and zeros, but you can't make it all ones. That's the way to non-knowledge. And I have a basic moral motto. I got it from it's the motto of Faber College, the fictional site of the movie Animal House, where they have carved into stone, knowledge is good. And I think overall knowledge is good, that the truth is better for us than ignorance, then lies, then wishful thinking or spin.
Here's kind of a left field question, but who would you say would win a fight between human biodiversity and cultural diversity?
Well, that's a good question, but it's not really a Batman versus Superman struggle for global superhero dominance. These are two conceptual tools for helping explain the world, how the world works. And they're as useful together as, say, words or numbers are to a thinker, or that as a left jab and a straight right are to a boxer. So it all depends on the question, and if you can bring both to bear, you're a lot better off.
Would you say, Steve, that human biodiversity could trump political correctness once the facts came out?
Well, political correctness is so powerful in modern America, and it's not dependent on facts. A young friend of mine who was a grad student in genomics, right out on the cutting edge of genetic research, used to call me up every few months and say, there's a new paper coming out and it's just going to shatter political correctness. And 3-4 times a year he would tell me that, and 3-4 times a year the paper would come out, and not only would it not be ignored, it would be given an excellent write-up in the New York Times by their genetics reporter, Nicholas Wade, and Wade would explain how this new finding from genetics subverted the conventional wisdom about how race doesn't exist and heredity doesn't matter. And nothing happened. Nobody noticed. Nobody paid any attention. People believe in political correctness these days because it's a status system. It's status climbing through stupidity. It's like the old Hans Christian Andersen story about the emperor's new clothes, where the con men come to town and they say, we're going to weave the finest clothes. They're going to be so fine, they're going to be invisible to everybody who is not worthy of holding their current position or is just unforgivably stupid. And so everybody couldn't see it, but they all said they could because they wanted to keep their jobs. And as we've seen this week, we've got Juan Williams being fired by NPR for saying that seeing people in Muslim garb on airplanes makes him nervous. We see one firing after another to encourage the others. So just having the facts out there isn't going to trump political correctness. That's too much built into our status system. About the best we can hope for is that human biodiversity is a field of inquiry, can survive, can avoid being crushed politically.
What are the political implications of noticing human biodiversity?
Well, that's really up to you. Let's go back, for example, to the 100-meter dash in the Olympics. So we've seen that 56 of the last 56 finalists have been men of West African descent. Now, what should be done about that? Well, we also notice the reality of human biodiversity between men and women. So we have a separate race for women because they'd never win in the 100-meter dash, and that seems to work real well. Does that imply we should have separate races for separate races? Or should whites and Asians get a 2-meter head start? Or should we let the best man win? All of those are possibilities, and they're really up to you. But at least now your political views on what should be done and what should the policy be are better informed. And that's the key thing, is that everybody is entitled to their own policy recommendations, but they're not entitled to their own facts.
What impact would you say HL Menken has had on your life?
Menken has been a role model that the idea that one journalist can influence how people think simply by telling the truth as he sees it, as vociferously, as eloquently, as perhaps and sometimes as bumptiously as Menken would tell it, has given me some courage.
What would you say to someone, Steve, that says this study of human biodiversity is just a complex cover for racism?
Yes, you hear that a lot, and you can see this growing anti-intellectualism in American life where more and more topics are completely off the table because of fear of what might be found. I mean, the Bolsheviks used to say, he who says A must say B, and therefore anybody who says A should be sent off to the gulag. In the US today, we're getting to a point where the fear is that he who says A must say B, which then would imply C, from which D could be inferred, so nobody better say A at all. And we see this constantly with people getting fired to encourage the others. I mean, for example, the CNN blowhard Rick Sanchez recently lost his job for sarcastically responding to his interviewer's suggestion that Jews were an oppressed minority in the media. We saw America's most prominent man of science, James D. Watson, the co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, being forced to resign from the major medical research lab that he had built up over the last 40 years for making statements about the reality of differences in IQ. So we see a real fear today about understanding how the world works and understanding humanity. And that fear, that bigotry, that advocacy of ignorance is justified under the means of smearing people who do want to understand the human race as racists.